In the past, this information has been suppressed, but now it can be told. Every man, woman, and mutant on this planet shall know the truth about de-evolution.
Oh, Dad, we're all DEVO.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thom and Joe show, where we are not men.
We are DEVO. Yes, we are talking about DEVO today.
Yeah, which is my choice, and it was... I don't know what I was thinking. I was probably just like, I need one more album to fill out my choices, and it's just, like, this is on top 100 lists, and I want to know more about DEVO because I like them. So let's do that, and it's...
Here we are.
Here we are. It's a band who is worthy of discussion, and they do, a lot of great things, and they inspire everybody around them, and, they were inspired by a lot of people that, they are like one more step in evolution, ironically, because DEVO is devolution.
Yep.
Commentary on consumerism and stuff like that. But it's like you can, get a line between like certain punk bands and bands like Kraftwerk, and then they converge on DEVO, and then DEVO goes into 80s new wave, and yeah. So they are very important.
Very important, yeah. We are talking, like, this album, like, to give you sort of some idea, this has regularly, like, appeared on, like, the greatest albums of all time sort of lists. This is a staple of lists like that. Basically, this is like a landmark album in particularly electronic music and electronic rock music. So yeah, we are talking about the first album by DEVO. Question: are we not men? Answer: we are DEVO.
Yeah, and this kind of has a long story coming to being, and it has cameos by a lot of people. Like, wait a minute, him? Yeah,
him. We'll get to who he is. And, like, this is very strange. Like, this is one of the, this is like of the records we've talked about this year. Which is now, we've got one more after this. Which obviously we'll reveal at the end of this episode. Which is another big landmark album, but of the late 80s. This is like one of these. This is like the album, I think, of the 5 that we're talking about this year, that is like, the stuff around this album is as interesting, if not more interesting, than the album's actual contents, which should have given the contents of this record is no small feat.
Mm-hmm. And so to start, we go to the start of the band's founding, which you might not expect.
Nope.
In like 1974. They came together. The reason? 4 Dead in Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
So, this band was formed, like, to make a political statement or to make something out of the Kent State Massacre.
I feel for non-American audiences, this is going to need a little bit of, obviously... a little bit more elaboration, Joe, because I know I have heard of this. I appreciate, obviously, a lot of our non-American audiences probably haven't.
Okay, so on May 4th, 1970, there was at Kent State University, there were demonstrations, student demonstrations at Kent State. And members of the Ohio National Guard were called in, and at some point during the event, the Ohio National Guard opened fire and killed 4 people. And this would later be immortalized by Crosby, Stills, and Nash song.
Yep.
Um,
So it'd be the Cosby, Stills, and Nash's. Oh God, and now I'm trying to remember which song it is now. Haven't it? Bloody hell! Sorry, apologies. Yeah. Ohio, which is by
Ohio,
Crosby,
just
and
called
obviously-
Ohio. Sorry.
Yeah.
I kept thinking it was For Dead in Ohio, but that's
Yeah.
just the chorus. So
This is basically a seminal, and I think obviously this is coming obviously again this is probably the most infamous moment of the anti-Vietnam sort of protests. It is. This is now the site on which these 4 people were shot by the Ohio National Guard is now a national monument. This is a seismic event. If Altamont is sort of the start of the end of the 60s, then Kent State is the start of the 70s, particularly in the United States.
yes, and it was kind of this boiling point where there was this what to call it, this derangement of America, I guess, which included the just reflecting on the times we just went past, like the 50s, like the early 60s, and like, what if bad? I mean, I don't mean to simplify it or like mock it. It's just like, what if the past 20 years we spent, after the war, like, just sandblasting the crap out of our image and like thinking that no bad things ever exist again. What if that was bad? And what if there were still, terrible things under the surface here? And
this is sort of exhuming all of them at once.
Yeah. And the way the DEVO did it was, creating this band that was essentially like 1950s, like 1960s imagery, I want to say, of these men without identities, and they kind of have like that American quiche look to them.
Oh,
and
it's that sort of nuclear, the same aesthetic to an extent that I feel pervades certainly Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. Is this sort of 50s nuclear sort of sensibility. A lot of the DEVO basic. So DEVO obviously are as you may have guessed, Kent State University students. I think one of the band, Gerald Cassell, who was the bassist, actually knew somebody who was obviously shot by the National Guard. For a band that otherwise, are quite frivolous in their message, this comes from a place of utter tragedy. It's like, and obviously from this comes, they meet, so basically the 2 members of the band at this point are art students, Gerald Cassell and Bob Lewis. They create basically, they in the late 60s, early 70s, they are basically doing sort of, I guess what we probably in this day and age call culture jamming, satirical art piece. They have this, and the concept of devolution sort of basically, it is very anti-consumerist, and it's something I don't think really that it gets touched on enough in the band. It is a very anti-consumerist, anti-sort of capitalists sort of, rant against, basically what the United States was by this point, certainly. It's like, mankind isn't evolving, mankind's de-evolving, and here's the truth about devolution.
Yeah, and it still is in many ways, although we've made complex boxes for ourselves to not deal with it or not understand it. Like, if you watch the internet and if you see the people who just find dozens of ways just to deny the truth in front of them. So, it's just, devolution evolved, ironically. But
yeah.
that's
So
another topic for another day. That would take another 2 hours.
completely, yeah. So they basically, they meet a keyboardist called Mark Mothersbaugh, whose name I hope I pronounced there. He's obviously, you know, a keyboardist in a local band. he has his own sort of concept of sort of Jocko Homo heaven band, you know, which is just this strange culture riffing. The band then sort of expands to additional Mothersbaughs, including obviously that they make basically this home video thing called The Truth About Devolution. This sort of features basically it's basically like a prototypal, you know, this is music videos before music videos were really a big thing. I mean, you got to consider, like, Bohemian Rhapsody is still 2 years away in the hindsight, and, you know, it's this strange sort of culture jamming sort of thing. Basically, it's like they do this music video. The music video is essentially 9 minutes and contains 2 songs. And you know, Jocko Homo, that will become one of the tracks on the album. Curious enough, it features like Mike, the Mothersbaugh father, in like a cameo role as this strange military guy. And then obviously, you know, and then obviously they get, you know, this is basically a prototypal music video at a point where like the music videos were still like very. You know, we'll obviously get on to later in this episode where what Devo do after this episode, and Devo and the nascent MTV were like a match made in heaven.
Absolutely. But
so
I mean, to make a somewhat long story short, like I thought their last name was Mothersbaugh, but Mothersbaugh sounds better because Borg.
Yeah, I don't know. It's Mothersbaugh. So Mark Mothersbaugh is nowadays probably most famous, equally famous, if not more famous, for being, you know, a much sought after soundtrack musician. He did the soundtrack, for example, for Ragnarok, and probably like most people of about my age, and potentially people of about your age, Joe, are probably going to remember him most for doing the theme for the Rugrats.
Yes.
Yeah, that was him.
And I can immediately think of the first 5 seconds of that song right off the top of my head.
Yep, same.
There you go.
Yeah. So basically, Devo sort of basically go through a series of lineup changes. You know, basically including multiple members of the Mothersbaugh family. We get Jim Mothersbaugh, who briefly ends up as the band's drummer. We get, you know, another brother. So we get the other Cassell brother, who is Bob Cassell. I mean, this gets to a point where like they're calling various like members of the band Bob 1 and Bob 2, so they can be differentiated. Which is like, this is very.
Yeah, it's a lot of long stuff. Through like lineup changes, the classic lineup, like when they made it big, were Mark and Bob Mothersbaugh, and Gerald and Bob Cassell, and there's Bob number 1 and Bob number 2. I wonder if that's where Mike Judge got the Bobs from.
Quite possible.
Office Space.
It sounds like the sort of thing that Mike Judge would do. And they got these. Their performances are very theatrical. Obviously, most of their performances start with this like 9-minute Truth About Devolution film. There's a really curious side story I'm just going to go into very briefly, which is basically so Devo were basically when they were a nascent band. Obviously, were playing like some festival. You know, they were basically, you know, starting out as a band. And they opened for, of all people, Sun Ra, who is... I need to briefly go into an aside of who Sun Ra is, because, again, he's another probably outside of, you know, certain circles. Sun Ra is, or was, basically an Afrofuturist jazz musician who was the leader of a band or a group called the Orchestra, who essentially were, I guess we could call them sort of what we would probably nowadays call sort of early, electronic jazz, sort of jazz fusion, the sort of stuff that Miles Davis is doing from sort of, the 70s onwards. And they also made a film called Space is the Place, which is one of the strangest and most beautiful things music films I think has ever been made. But essentially, like the whole sense of them was they were basically like space traveling Egyptians, and the idea of Devo and Sun Ra, who were sort of like the completely opposite ends of this sort of music, but also hiding behind this idea of character. Apparently, depending on what source there was either riots and Sun Ra never got to play, or basically the gig just went on as normal, and we somehow got an audience that liked Devo and Sun Ra anyway.
Yeah. And to tell you like how like touchy a lot of people were in like the early 70s, it's like Devo were controversial. Like sometimes like promoters would like turn off the band's instruments and force them to leave.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
we're talking. I mean, you got to consider like Devo are doing stuff with like homemade electronics. They are doing something not undissimilar in the early to mid 70s that Kraftwerk are doing. Obviously, you've got to consider like, Kraftwerk are coming out of a whole, sphere of stuff where a lot of groups are playing in this style, and the German ethic towards electronic music has always been more welcoming. The idea of these sort of, this rock band with sort of, homemade synthesizers and other stuff, and dressed up in boiler suits, or the sort of garb that Devo wear to this day, it seems like completely alien to obviously the average American concert goer. This is before the artifice and the increased impact, focus on image in obviously the 1980s, but and it's at this point that sort of Devo start getting noticed, I think is the fair point to say, I think, at this point.
Yeah. There are a couple different sources that say like how these people found them. Wikipedia says one thing, and then some of the other sources say another, but just essentially David Bowie and Iggy Pop get aware of Devo.
Yeah, this is like,
and they're like,
this is like slightly post Berlin Bowie. So this is Bowie like one he has basically dealt with like most of his addictions, and is relatively. I mean, Iggy Pop himself has basically spent like at this point like 2 or 3 years in the best part of 18 months, 2 years in an institution, because he has basically blown his mind on drugs, and the only person who's visited him during this time is Bowie. Bowie is instrumental, and Pop will continue to this day to say that Bowie was instrumental in him basically being alive into the 1980s. But it's also interesting that it's Bowie and Pop who take notice of it, because there is an undeniable, although American punk, I think we've had this conversation, we spoke about the Velvet Underground to an extent. American punk is a very different beast to obviously how it was in for example the United Kingdom. You've more got bands that essentially take what I suppose we would call art rock and takes it into a different, you got things like Television, you got things like the Patti Smith Group. Yeah, you've got bands like, the Ramones, but even the Ramones are sort of, doing something, the Ramones are basically harking back to essentially bubblegum pop of the 50s and early 60s, but a higher volume and with more discordance. American punk has always been a slightly more verbose beast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
and
David
slightly less on the nose, which some
Yeah.
people would, take as a problem. It
Yeah.
just depends on how you go.
So,
And we'll get into that later as
Yeah.
we talk Devo.
Yeah, so yeah, David Bowie and Iggy Pop basically take note of them. David basically arrives at the start of like a concert, and it goes, "I'm gonna produce this band because they're really cool, and I'm gonna basically help them find a record deal." And he kind of does that, but we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because this isn't the only celebrity cameo in this episode.
No.
Nope. Hello, Neil Young.
Hi, Neil Young.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's fitting that a band formed, from the source of the song Ohio by Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Yep. Get the other member of CSN.
Get the other member, Young,
Yeah.
to go out there and they get involved with Devo, and they are absolutely a fit. So,
I mean, Young at this point, Young at this point has basically spent the sort of, I would guess them. I think this is fair to say, the middle third of the 70s just basically kind of drifting out of the public sphere. I mean, Young has not basically, by the point he's like running into Devo, has not really made a particularly spectacular record. He's made On the Beach, which, in hindsight is an extremely good record.
Oh, and I should say Neil Young was on Ohio, and probably was the main driver of that.
Yeah.
I just call him Crosby, Stills, and Nash as short.
Yeah.
Because adding the Young gets...
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It...
But yeah, Young...
We like odd numbers. We don't like the even numbers when we put them all together.
Nope. Yeah, so Young is basically... Young is not in a great place. He's I think the thing that most typifies this period is his appearance in 1976 is The Last Waltz, where Marty is basically Martin Scorsese obviously directs the Last Waltz, by the way, R.I.P. Robbie Robinson, basically has to delay releasing the film so he can re-edit the film so that the cocaine that is basically hanging out of Neil Young's nose isn't as obvious. Like, Neil is not in a particularly good place. He increasingly feels out of place, and it's very, very ironic that he then sort of basically teams up with these outlandish individuals who sort of basically... So he makes a film called Human Highway, which again has sort of become a cult thing. This is like is this Neil Young's weird electronic era? Is this a little bit? Is that
something like that? It's Neil Young is very disgruntled with the label, and if some label was stupid enough to sign him, he made like a rockabilly. He made an electronic album. He did a lot of things to piss off the label and not give them what they want. And then he would eventually come back to Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young, and they would make one last crappy album, and then
they'd fight with each other again.
Yeah, and then and then Neil Young would just become Neil Young again, I guess. And he would just be the cranky old man.
Yeah. So, Neil Young proceeds to spend $3 million of his own money to make a film called, like, Human Highway, which is this sort of ultra stylized film about nuclear Armageddon.
It is very much in the Fallout style of, 50s quiche and nuclear holocaust and, it all, slamming it together because the 50s were just this clean era of family and happiness and nothing was wrong. our war is done, but we still blew ourselves up anyway.
Yeah.
And Devo were cast as the nuclear trash men.
Yep.
I haven't seen this movie in whole. I've seen like pieces of it. I don't have like.
It was
couldn't
like
find a full copy of it in time.
It's been out of print for a while. It's just difficult to get hold of these days. I think Young re-released a director's cut a few years ago. It is not, it's not I don't think Neil Young's ever been ashamed of a single thing he's made, but this is like one of the more outlandish Neil thing, and kind of where Devo sort of basically link into this musically is they sing a little song called Hey Hey My My.
Yes. One of Neil Young's most famous songs, so much that it was covered by Oasis in their live album.
Yep. So basically, Neil, between meeting up with outlandish electronic geniuses Devo and, the nascent punk movement, basically goes, I've got to evolve or die, which is, again, to sort of, to juxtapose against the whole evolution thing, very, very amusing, and basically makes probably, I would say, the best album of his sort of second half of his career. And basically it re-energizes him, and he basically relaunches his career off the back of this.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. This is not a popular opinion, and there are people who are going to shut the hell off this YouTube video right away when I say it. I don't listen to a lot of Neil Young by himself because the voice is a little too much for me.
Yeah.
And I do say the same thing about Geddy Lee.
I mean, it is. To be fair,
there's something in that kind of voice that I don't know. My mind doesn't like it. And it's not them. It is me. I am the fuck up here.
Oh, there goes me ever recommending 2112 as an album.
Well, we can do it. I mean, I can do it.
It's 45 minutes of Ayn Rand, Joe. Anyway, so let's get back to.
I know, but also it's like I heard Tom Sawyer for the first time, and I thought that was a Muppet singing.
We have now been blocked in Canada.
We've now been blocked in
Canada. So basically, Devo have kind of. So we need to get to obviously the album and its recording. Again, it's like another album that doesn't really, the recording process is basically open and shut case. It's Devo have basically road tested every single one of these songs by the time they go into the studio. They are basically, this material is road tested. It works. It's fine. So of course what happens is David Bowie goes, hello, here's my mate Brian Eno, who's going to basically do his whole creative strategies thing with you. He's going to basically try and put, so Brian Eno, as a producer, I think is somebody we'll obviously come in to talk to, because he's one of my favourite record producers of all time, let alone one of my favourite musicians. Eno has a Eno is a studio experimenter, and, obviously you can definitely hear there is an undeniable lineage, despite the fact Devo started musically at about the same time with the band that Brian Eno started off in, which is Roxy Music. And Roxy Music were essentially a very good art rock band who just happened to have a slightly mad-looking guy basically abusing the hell out of a synthesizer half the time to make some of the most outlandish, brilliant, and weird music. I mean, they also had a flautist, which would indicate everything you need to know about Roxy Music. They were basically taking, it's a good example of that sort of slightly pre-glam rock thing where bands are starting to go, here is the template of what it means to be a standard rock band. Let's push this in this direction. Let's, throw in sort of, androgynous clothing. And obviously out of that we get Bowie, and even Pop sort of delves into that sort of stuff where he's obviously, when he's in, obviously, with the final Stooges album, Raw Power. The problem is, whilst Bowie said he would produce the album, David Bowie is being busy being David Bowie. He is basically, I mean, this is the same point where Bowie is making Lodger. He is also acting in Just a Gigolo. He is basically busy, but he's busy during the week. He has basically 2 days a week where he can come and help Brian Eno do the Brian Eno things. The kind of big problem with Brian Eno things 5 days out of 7 during the week is Devo have basically got an idea of what they want this album to sound like, and generally sort of just basically ignore Brian's suggestions.
It's the opposite of what Brian Eno would do, because the engine for Devo is already built. The machine is already constructed. You can't just go in and change the machinery to do something else. You have to build an entirely different machine, which is what Brian Eno likely wanted to do. But
it's what Brian Eno does. Like, Brian Eno basically, he will go in and he will go, alongside obviously the creative strategies briefly are basically a series of 100 flashcards which Eno uses as a creative tool to basically go, here is, one of the most famous examples is, imagine you are a member of a band in a country that has outlawed outlawed music. Play the notes that, have been banned. It basically pushes, people like, particularly fruitful relationships, obviously, with U2. I mean, he managed to make Coldplay sound, artsy and rocky, and, he is a supremely good producer for when a band are in a liminal or transitional phase, or when you are a band of the size of U2 and can spend 6 months in the studio basically experimenting. Devo are not that band.
They are a band that came from, inspired by Kraftwerk, who were, the first computer group, sort of, where everything is automatic, the individualism is dead, and they take that and tune it to, like, American social commentary. They even have, like, the style, I can't remember what it was called. It's like Atomic or something like that. There's most of their songs are in like a 4/4 style that keeps going regardless.
Kraut rock.
It runs like a car. It's just essentially like a motor that just keeps going the same beat over and over. Steps.
I know what you mean. Motoric, which is particularly related to drum.
My head switched around a couple letters.
No, that's fine. So basically, apart from basically dueling with Brian Eno, the kind of there are a couple of little interesting asides to this. Bowie was originally going to produce this in Japan for some reason. It's eventually produced in Cologne in West Germany and in San Francisco. The most eventful thing, apart from David Bowie basically coming back into the studio going, okay, fine, you're fighting with Brian, I'll mix the album, fine, okay. The only other really interesting thing is Gerald Casale missed the plane to get to Germany. So they basically, for like the one day that Gerald isn't there, they basically jam with Bowie, and it's just like, which is just like okay, so what are we going to do? Oh, let's just jam for a day and see what happens. So that's basically the production of the album. The album cover is probably like the first real indication of that this is not going to be like your normal rock album, I think.
Yeah.
So
and half of how it's iconic, but half of how it came out was accidental.
Completely. So
I'll talk about this a little bit. So they wanted to use a picture of Chichi Rodriguez, who is a famous golfer from the time. One of the big ones. You might have like forgotten him, but
I've
like,
never heard of him, Joe. I've never heard of him. I've got to be confessed.
Oh, that's fine. You don't need to know about these guys. It's just like they were names in famous golfers, and they were in the news for being. Like I myself didn't know much about golf until I worked a television job, and every weekend I have to watch a golf tournament.
Oh,
so,
Jesus!
Like you'll lose like names. But they couldn't get permission in time.
Yeah,
like, they eventually got permission, but so they used this mock-up of the same picture, but they threw in parts of JFK, Nixon, Lyndon Johnson,
and Ford, apparently,
Ben Ford, yeah.
I could definitely see Kennedy in the face. I cannot see like anybody. Oh no, the eyebrows. I suppose it's a very bizarre image. I must admit, I'm going to put an image of the screen on the screen, but it is basically this not quite right. It looks like a photo kit of somebody who's probably been arrested for somebody quite unpleasant. And he's got this sort of slightly. I mean, it's basically 50s, 60s kitsch like. Then
it's transmogrified into something disturbing.
Yeah, yeah. There's a couple again really interesting stories about the album cover. Apparently, like part of it was also that the head of or the vice president of Warner Brothers sort of legal department was like, no, we're not disrespecting golf like that. It was just like, no, he was a very, very keen golf fan and was like, no, we are not, besmirching the face of Chi-Chi Rodriguez in this way.
If you ever want to know why golf's still a thing, and if you're, a 20-something on Twitter who, like, golf is a waste of space, wait until you bump up against, like, your general manager of the company you work at or the president.
Oh, completely.
And all they can talk about is, like, their tee times and when they're going to golf. That's why golf is still a huge thing and why it takes up so much space in our world. So
yeah, completely. But
I like playing video games of golf. I would kill someone if I actually played the sport of golf because I have shakes from my ADHD that cannot handle that mode of body control that much. And I would hit someone. The golf club would not do what I wanted it to do, and but also it's kind of a massive waste of space either way. So
and water, but we're not going to get into the politics hour. Fun fact number 2: Chi Rodriguez eventually agreed for a lump sum of $2,500 to basically go, yeah, sure, I will be on your album cover. This was used on the single for the Be Stiff, for later song Be Stiff, for part of his payment for actually his image rights on the album cover. Chi Rodriguez was given 50 copies of the album, which he only listened to once, preferring more sort of traditional 50s and 60s music. God knows what he thought of this. God knows. In the UK, the Europeans got this very strange image of Mark Mothersbaugh, which is from the Devolution film. It's fine. It's ironically more in line with the contents, which kind of makes it certainly like the inferior version of this album cover.
Just as a side note, it was released by Warner Brothers in America and Virgin in the UK. So
the other really
everybody was in the mix, and they kind of got split down the middle on who would get it.
Yeah. The other fun fact of this is because he basically paid for transport and recording sessions, despite their disagreements with Eno. Brian Eno continues to get money for this album to this day because basically he had it written into his contract that in return for obviously basically bankrolling this, he would get a cut of all album sales. So yeah, this makes Brian a small amount of money every day, I would assume. Alongside because it's like hey, it's Brian Eno.
Maybe it's too early to get an album, but yeah, I definitely know he gets for a few years he got a lot of money because the first track is the theme to Ridiculousness on MTV, and they used to run 24-hour marathons, like 4 or 5 days a week of Ridiculousness, and it's just like, if you want to know what Ridiculousness is and you're out of the Americas, basically it's the Idiocracy show Ow My Balls made real.
Oh my god. Okay.
It's just films of people doing stupid things and getting hurt.
Oh, it's what we would call in the UK for our UK listeners. This is otherwise known as "You've Been Framed." Yeah.
But yes, so I don't know how Devo feels about this. I mean, I'm sure they cash the checks, but it's just like art becoming life, that mocks the art that it was made.
Yeah.
That was, I don't know.
Yeah, I would say
this was made to kind of work against. Like Devo is against everything Ridiculousness is for, essentially, which is just like watching a bunch of people get hurt for no money, and then having like 3 semi-famous, semi-rich people just talk shit about them.
Yeah, the thing is, Devo, I feel, kind of have never quite. I feel it's a very unfair thing to describe Devo as. They are sort of like they are occasionally dubbed as a novelty act, and I think a novel that is complete. That's like calling, I don't know, something like the Flying Lizards, a novelty act. It's like, no, they just happen to produce music that is very strange and or describing Captain Beefheart as a novelty act. It's like, well, no, it just sounds very different to the typical sort of, well, at least at that point it sounded very different from the typical rock lexicon. I feel that
I think the biggest problem for Devo is they are easy to put in that corner, and it is very hard. It is harder to get the point of a lot of Devo songs than maybe their appearance would indicate.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. This is like, that we have to... we have to sort of, obviously, we will talk... Let's talk about Weird Al Yankovic now, because I think that's sort of like the sort of thing, the sort of like... The Weird Al Yankovic Dare to Be Stupid, I think, has sort of like, has overshadowed like the entire thing, in his style pastiche of, Devo, that basically in 3.5 minutes just basically perfectly skewers Devo like as a group.
Well, that's debatable because there's some people who skewer it, and some say it's the best encapsulation of Devo that was not ever done by Devo, because
and those people would include Mark Mothersbaugh.
Yes, who like saw it and fell in love with it, and he hated it.
It's
like,
kind of
I mean, Weird Al Yankovic is another person who, because he's been in the public so much, we get so much more love with him, but and like you get the basic idea, like the song "It's Fat" instead of "I'm Bad." Like he gets that, but he is so much better of
completely. I mean, I saw him
a musician
earlier
and like a lyricist. Like if you
completely
listen to Word Crimes, like That is
completely.
an incredible song, just
Yeah.
built on the basic idea of parody, blurred lines, and
Yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah.
holy shit, that is brilliant, top
Yeah.
to bottom.
I mean,
And,
yeah,
like,
I mean, I saw him live in, oh god, February. He was, and this was like his ill-advised, whatever, silly, ill-advised vanity tour, which is like mostly his original material. None of the song parodies, and it's like, why are we not going? This guy is one of the best, comedy rock vocal, not even comedy rock, but like rock lyricists, like period. It's like even when you get to something like Albuquerque, it's like 12 and a half, 13, 14 minutes of like basically full out rock, stuff. And it's like,
And the funny connector bit is that Weird Al Yankovic was my first concert. He was at the Buffalo County Fair in Buffalo County, Nebraska.
Yep.
And he was playing at this thing where they had shown cattle the day before. And thankfully he had a raised stage, so he wasn't playing in the dirt where there might be a cow pie or something. But it was just like, the acoustics were not made for a concert.
No.
Like, Weird Al was too loud for that place. Like, you needed earplugs to hear the lyrics.
Yeah.
And, like, there was occasionally that metallic feedback.
Yeah, it's just like
you'll hear when things get loud and hit, like, aluminum a certain way.
Yeah.
So,
ouch. Yeah, so we'll start with the beginning of the album, which is where you usually start with albums.
yeah.
Uncontrollable Urge is Uncontrollable Urge is kind of like, it starts off basically sounding like, a typical, late 70s sort of like something basically something like television would go. And then you get that sort of the electronic elements come in. You go, we are not in Kansas anymore. although you are. Well, no, you're not in Kansas. No, but it perfectly sets up. It goes, yeah, you think this is just going to be another, New York art rock album by, people who like study guitar tunings. No. This is something very different.
Yeah, it combines a lot of things. It's obviously there's the electronic and there's the beat, which is just steady.
Yeah.
And it combines like surfer music and
definitely
of
it's a
course,
surfer rock sort of
So there's this part of the 50s, especially because the 50s were steady, maybe change one chord in the fourth time you go around the song. It's like chord, other chord, that kind of 50s rock where every song sounded like the same and every song didn't go for more than 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. So this is very, and you get that very weird sort of synthesizer sort of blast for occasional. Yeah, this is about conspicuous consumption, isn't it? It's like, this is basically, it goes, got an urge, got a surge, and it's out of control. Got an urge, I want to purge because I'm losing control. And it's like, yeah, this is the start of like the devolution lecture. It's like, yeah, look how capitalism, basically. It is like very, very conspicuous consumption. It's like, you gotta buy this.
Yeah. They give you this urge, but it's not like, and it's supposed to never stop because, you can't hit your limit at capitalism, as we found by people who, as if the charts aren't going up, thousands of people need to be fired, or something like that. Yeah.
But it has got this is certainly the most post-punky sounding track on the record. This is about as normal as Devo sound on this record. On later albums, and certainly by the time we get into the 80s with Devo, they are sort of writing more things that actually, particularly when we get to, 1980s freedom of choice, which is far more, I hesitate to say more commercialized, but it is far more electronic, and, it's far more, songs are like built to sound like songs. They are not, this art piece that just happens to be danceable to it is actually, you know, in some cases really good song.
Yeah, like most first albums, it's a proof of concept, and literally it is a proof of concept because they are introducing who they are on the album cover, or on the album name, and in the album itself.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a cracking opening to the album. I have to confess, I listened to this I mean I have listened to this album before, you know, basically because, you know, DEVO are basically, you know, on the edge of a lot of musical scenes I like. I mean, I like krautrock, I like electronic rock particularly, I like, you know, new wave, post wave, that's, you know, post rock, that sort of thing. You know, they are, but this is just a great opening. This is like basically going, this is, you know, this is not what you've expected from the contents, is it? You know, the cover.
It was kind of blown for me because it was in so many things before this, especially Ridiculousness.
Yeah.
And it was in Wolf of Wall Street
and
Jackass. So, I mean, Jackass, I sort of get it because Jackass is this. It's weird, like the one the movie that was released during the pandemic. Like got 4-star reviews and legit. It's like how they weirdly come together as a family and.
Was this Jackass Forever? Yeah, but it's like
Jackass Forever. Yeah,
this is weirdly emotional. Like this series that started off with basically people doing horrible, unmentionable things to themselves, has sort of basically mutated into, you know, this meditation,
super meaningful thing.
this meditation upon, you know, particularly obviously given the fallen members of the group and, you know, the advancing ages of, you know, Johnny Knoxville et al. Is like this meditation on, you know, masculinity and, you know, basically pushing your body to the extreme as you're getting older, and, you know, and family is like, what is I remember watching it going, this is, am I about to tear up? Jackass Forever, you know, a film series that started with, you know, a scene in which, you know, I mean, I haven't seen the original Jackass. I mean, I don't need to tell you which scene I'm talking. You know, idiots careening down a hill in Los Angeles to Carmina Burana. It's like, yeah, this is weird. It's like, what's it doing? Yeah, and it's like, you know. That's a very strange, you know, strange film. Yeah, Uncontrollable Urge is great. I do feel it's like it has become like, alongside a lot of the stuff from, you know, Freedom of Choice, has almost become the DEVO calling card. And then sort of DEVO wrong footers, and we get perhaps the most, like, the sense with DEVO, there's a puckish sense to DEVO occasionally, where they are basically just tearing up the rock rule book, and nowhere else is this better seen than on their cover of the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction.
Yeah,
it's like,
which
you know,
is just this. It has this little guitar beat. It's like another constant beat, motoric, and it kind of simplifies the song down to listening to the lyrics and interpreting it through the DEVO filter, which is
completely, you know,
this consumerism is bad. This is, you know, this is all empty. Completely.
I mean, so yeah, I mean, obviously the original Stones song is this raunchy, you know, it's basically where Keith Richards goes, holy shit, this is a fuzz pedal, man, I'm gonna stick it in the fuzz pedal, and you know, they do the you know, the whole Keith Richards thing of, you know, playing open E and going do, you know, that's, you know, and, you know, obviously it gets horns in the back, you know, it's a very mid-60s, you know, it's basically Keith and Mick doing, you know, the sort of, you know, a Chicago sort of, you know, blue rock song, you know, with that big sort of horn section that a lot of, you know, the Motown stuff sort of does, and it basically takes like it almost drains it of like all of the passion and all of the the raunchiness. Um, Ironically, wasn't the only cover by a very strange seminal experimental group, because 2 years earlier, the Residents, who basically we could do an entire episode on, they are another art collective from the United States who are, in this case, they dress in giant eyeball helmets and they produce very strange avant-garde art rock and are tremendously prolific. Also covered it 2 years later. They would then re-release it after Devo's version and make but their version is like, their version is, the complete antithesis. If the Rolling Stones version is somewhere in the middle, the Residents version is basically just deranged. It's not well. And you get so you basically get this exsanguinated, this sort of nervous, twitchy sort of energy to Devo's version, which is it's obviously the performance by so yeah, actually apparently a couple of little facts about this one. Originally they were going to put the lyrics to Paint It Black to this, because apparently basically like the only thing that actually remains really from the Stones version is basically the lyrics and that little horn section, that doo-doo-doo section at the end. Mick Jagger apparently really liked this. Like they basically played him like an early mix of it, and this is probably where still the point where like you've got acetates, and apparently just like Mick Jagger really dug this, and that would lead to an appearance on SNL, which basically launched the band into the national psyche.
Yeah. And what was it, like 2 weeks after Rolling Stones did? And they still did their cover of I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
Yeah, completely. So the Stones would do... Basically, the Stones did 2 weeks... The Stones would do it, and there was a gap, and there was like... 2 weeks after the Stones had like come on to SNL, this is basically at the point where the Stones are, starting to coast on past glories. It's sort of like, the basically it's only rock and roll, but we like it sort of era. Devo come on, basically present this strange, twitchy, slightly nervy and this completely nervy version of the Stones song, and proceed to be very famous indeed.
Yes, and I should note this is a time where Saturday Night Live did not know what the hell it was doing.
No. Like this is early SNL,
episodes, and it'll be like just extremely strange because they didn't have. I mean, they had the cast. I mean, they had the idea, but they didn't have like what they wanted to do with it down. So you would just get really weird performances, and like extended ones because they didn't have enough material to fill time, and sometimes
completely
just uncomfortable.
Completely, you would so this is basically the Some Girls era. I mean actually no, it wasn't even 2 weeks later. It was the week after. It was like the week after, which would then be followed the week after that by Frank Zappa, who apparently was taking horrendous amounts of drugs. 2 weeks after that, you got the Grateful Dead. Kate Bush a couple of weeks later. Early reggae musician Pete Tosh a couple of weeks later. We are you're getting basically in this I mean this is 1978-79. You're getting like things like the very very nascent Talking Heads, the Chieftains. We get this very strange mix of and Robert Fripp just turning up out of the... No, it's very, very peculiar. As you said, it's sort of like they are basically throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what happens.
Sticks.
Yeah, completely. Very odd. Anyway.
Okay, so next up is Praying Hands. And we're trying to do a surfer dance for Christians.
Yep.
That's the concept of this song.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen that music video, I like big books and I cannot lie.
Yep.
You kind of get the idea of what this is poking fun at.
Yeah. It is
hardcore Christians trying to be hip with the kids and, failing.
Yep.
So that's it. That's the whole concept. And the only thing I can think of is diddling with the left hand.
Yes, it is exactly.
Does that still have the meaning from the 70s?
Yeah, okay. Yes, it is. It is a reference to exactly what you think it is. God, I really, really like Mark Mothersbaug's lyrics on this. You can. There's certain songs on this. There's another song on this which we'll come to, where you can hear like the same sort of singing style. It's going to sound like a really weird comparison. Like you can hear like Frank Black's singing style from like the Pixies, like nearly a decade later. It's that same sort of like, this is clearly not a trained vocalist, but this is somebody who, particularly when you've got like the gang vocals, which the Devo tend to use, which obviously is all the band singing together. It has this remarkable effect of like, but it is this is basically taking the piss out of fundamentalist Christians. It's like it's very much just this is like full on. Apparently, basically, this is vaguely, particularly for sort of like, this is particularly going after two televangelists who, I'm just going to read the names. I don't know if these are particularly infamous people, but they are someone called Rex Humbard and Ernest Angley. Yeah, this is who were both preachers in Ohio in the 70s.
Yeah. If you were around there, you probably heard them because like TV only had 3 channels at that point.
Yeah.
And they were probably, if you were like hungover on a Sunday, you probably saw them. And you probably didn't like it because can I have something else on the TV, please? I got a headache, but I got to watch something.
Yeah. Rex Humbard built a rotating restaurant, which was then investigated by the SEC. Which I don't know who the SEC. Oh, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which means he probably did some fraud.
Yeah.
There's a surprise.
A lot of religious money goes through fraud.
Yep. There we go. That's a surprise. A good song. The first half of the record is like stacked with basically Devo going after their standard targets, and these standard targets include junk from space. Space junk.
Devo's future needs Planetes.
Yeah, space junk. It's
that's a joke made for me.
Yep.
And this group, us duo who also does anime, Planetes is a anime and / manga series about space junk cleaners.
Yep.
And how they get disrespected even though they have the cool job of working in space. Yeah. So this is the unfortunate tale of Sally who got hit by space junk and died. And there's lots of space junk coming from all around the world because we keep launching space junk for our dick measuring contests.
Yes. Yeah, I have to deal with what is it, fucking the Elon Musk satellite thing that people keep buying and it doesn't work properly. Yeah. Very, it is typical Devo just doing like this is like, feels like occasionally like one for the audience skewing Christianity, one for us singing about space junk. but it's important because space junk is bad and you must not let your girlfriend be hit by space junk.
No.
Good track though. Good, like, again, another.
And like the opening scene of Planetes, the anime, and I think the manga is like a little screw, going through space and then smashing into a shuttle, cracking the window and killing everybody on board.
Yep.
So space junk is important to clean up.
Very important.
Let's not, even though there's a silly song about it, it is a thing that will become an issue. Devo comes off like a joke, but they are at many points very serious.
Very serious. I mean, you got to consider around this point, Skylab was sort of like slowly starting to break up, and it's like, is this going to fall on somewhere inhabited? Is this going to end up killing people? It's space junk. You must take your space junk very seriously. Now we come to the one song on the album that has not dated well, despite being like a fixed part of the Devo set list. This is the subject matter of this is not dated well. This song is called.
It is basically how we've gone. Is like we've devolved so much that the mongoloid is a normal person, and when we say mongoloid, it's suggesting somebody with Down syndrome.
Yeah, it's a term that I got to obviously suffix that very quickly with. It is a term that was used in. I mean, even by the 70s, it was like, you can't call somebody that. It's there is a puckish transgressivity to Devo on occasion. They are they were also dressing up. They had a character rather unfortunately called the Chinaman, who they also used during concerts. They don't do this anymore for fairly obvious reasons. It's a very good song, but the general politics of this is not dated particularly well.
Kind of fear, ableist.
Both.
Even though it was making the point against it that we are the stupid people, but it like a lot of things, people miss the Devo point because if you're not listening very closely, and at times I had to pull out the lyrics to look at it, and it's like, oh, that's what it's about. It's so simple what it's about. It's, childishly what it's about, but you don't get the feeling listening to it that this is a song making fun of you, or this is a song that what they're saying is bad, and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
so,
and even
you can just listen through the entire album and not know it's trying to say something. It's just it comes off as the quiche it's trying to use to send a message, and obviously this is their first album. They get better at it. I mean, they do a cover of Nine Inch Nails' Head Like a Hole eventually, and you get the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely. Again, going back to a briefly, so this really did sort of basically, this was the other major song this is actually Devo's first song that was actually released as a single from this album on Devo's own label at that point. It is a staple of their show. I can't find any comment really about this, which is as I said, I think obviously Devo have basically there is a sense with Devo. Yes, this is a rather antiquated way of doing it, but I could not find any indication of a controversy about this, and obviously the music video is very, very much against the idea of denigrating people like this. But it's the one track on the album that sort of goes, the music is very, very, very good. The social commentary is a little bit dated and is the only real point where you remember, this is 1978 and you did call people that at that point. And then we get the best track on the album.
Choco Homo, which is it's kind of the entire basis of Devo.
Yeah.
And it explains their concept.
Yeah, it is basically. It's also where the album gets its title from. It basically outlines the whole devolution things. It opens with, obviously, you know, the immortal couplet of "They tell us that we lost our tails evolving up for little snails." I just I say it's all just wind and sails. Are we not men? We are Devo. Are we not?
Which is a reference to the 1932 movie Island of Lost Souls.
Yep.
Which is an adaptation of the Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yep.
And that kind of got banished to obscurity because audiences in 1932 weren't ready for it.
Yep. And audiences
one could say audiences in 1995 weren't ready for it.
And in that intervening gap, Marlon Brando certainly wasn't enjoying it.
Yeah.
That film is a con.
Well, there was a very basic British version with Michael York in it
which is fine.
Perfectly okay.
And that Simpsons
it's
episode.
okay. It's a 1970s sci-fi movie. It's like
its budget is
yeah, the budget is nothing, but
it's probably shot in a quarry somewhere in the outskirts of Cardiff, because everything in the 1970s British was shot in a quarry on the outskirts of Cardiff. Yeah, Jogger Homer is just like the most Devo-ish song I think that Devo have done, like certainly on this record. I feel like stuff particularly on Freedom of Choice is sort of like I get the whole ethos of Devo a little bit, but this is like, you know, who are Devo? Well, they're not men, they're Devo.
Yeah, King Koopa hit the devolution thing on his little brain machine and put, you know, a band in it, and then they became Devo.
And then pointed at them and said, "Monkey." Oh god, we're referencing all the bad 90s films this episode. That was
yes, we are.
I mean, yeah, very strange, very bad.
But it is kind of that idea that, you know, we've lost more than we've gained getting into this point, so we have to go back.
and eventually, and what I do love is that basically like, the last third of this song almost turns into like this sort of marching sort of song of like, you know, call and response back between Mark and the rest of the band of like, are we not men, we are Devo, are we not men? You almost like the sort of sound off 1, 2, you know, we must repeat DEVO, and it very much captures like basically what Devo are trying to do on this album, which is like, behind all this musical silliness, there's like a serious, as I said, the seriousness of Devo's message is occasionally a little bit hard to know. It's like, is this entirely tongue in cheek? Is this, you know, is there an arch sensibility to this, or do they really just mean what they want? You know, what they aim for, basically.
And you know, and it's helped by like there are obvious targets, and then is this a target or is this not a target? Well, the last one, they were obviously doing this as satire, so
yeah,
maybe they're doing this as satire, and you know, then you think way too much about it, and you don't even come up with a good essay about it. It's just like,
it's like, what?
Well, I just used up all of my brain on nothing for an hour.
Yeah, it's like, well, they're certainly singing about something. What that something is, God knows.
It's like, are they saying they are de-evolved? Is that meaning like we as society are de-evolved? Like they say monkeys are in business suits and all of that, so they're like basic people. But are they saying they are de-evolved from the culture that has gone wrong and gone back to the basics? I mean, you know, there's a question between that, and those are the debates that, you know, mess with your head a little bit.
Yeah, completely. This is sort of, I get, the album sort of basically is into, and it's definitely the first half of the album that has all like the really big hits on it. The second half is a little bit. It's not by no means is it lacking. It's more it does typical 70s album. Like the second half of the album is and the rest.
And what I would say is it is more like what you expect from an art band. Like if an art band showed up at your coffee shop, they would play stuff like this. And if they were doing it in like the late 90s, early 2000s, they are just like, okay, these people have nothing. They are just copying other people. I mean, this was probably a lot newer, like now when they made it like in the late 70s, and this was, starting to become more of a thing, but like, it's been weakened because people have done this more on the point and probably better. Yeah. I mean, like, quote unquote better. Like,
Devo
like,
themselves.
There are a lot of, Devo themselves have done this better, but there's still some awesome solos. There are, a lot of worthwhile stuff. Like, I mean, the instrumental beginning of Too Much Paranoia is really damn good.
Yeah. And again, this is another lashing against consumerism. Yeah, it's, Big Mac attack and hold the pickles, hold the lettuce. It's like I wonder what this is about. Is it about, conspicuous consumption and,
using their own jingle against them?
Yeah, it's like... it's very much like there's occasional moments where Devo almost do turn into like, the sort of music this sort of co-opting of, jingles. I think is definitely, they do occasionally write with, an eye on a hook, and it's like, and then the hook stabs you in the face.
Yeah, it's a collage. You would say, like, if it would be like you put a picture of. You had an advertisement for Burger King on somebody's coffin or something like that kind of collage.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, and it works in certain cases, and then you get the longest track on the album, which is Gut Feeling, which I actually genuinely have like slightly forgotten how it goes.
Yeah, Wes Anderson likes it. He used it in The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Yep.
Yeah, and Wes Anderson would find the deep cuts from famous.
Of course he would. Of course he would.
Yeah, that is most of what he does in his life.
When he's not getting,
or make a string quartet of Hey Jude.
or getting a Portuguese guy to basically cover several David Bowie songs, which kind of overshadows everything else on the Life Aquatic soundtrack, to be entirely honest, at least for me.
There is, obviously, but it does kind of have a deep cut, and it's like, it's an okay song. I didn't listen to it and have a negative reaction, but it's just like, I don't get what they're getting at. Like, I don't know. It's are they talking about a person, or are they talking about a thing? And then it just goes into and then slap your mammy down, slap your pappy down.
Which is on the, so the really weird thing is, as I say, we obviously listen to this album on, well, generally I tend to listen to this on Spotify. Spotify doesn't have like this album in its standard like thing. It's a weird double pack with Devo's live album, which is obviously we Devo Live, which is obviously because Virgin released them as, obviously because Virgin obviously owned the rights to Devo's back catalogue now. It's a little bit weird for an album this important, but it's fine. It's this is two different tracks on the that's probably that's about the most important thing I've got to say about this. Slap Your Mummy is a very strange song.
Yeah. I'm like, oh. Yeah, when they say about this song on Genius, when it says, you know, what the song really means, and it's just like, oh, this song was, you know, released as a single alongside of the cover of the Rolling Stones' I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
Yeah.
It is often considered one of their best songs, and it's like, that doesn't explain it. I
No.
don't know why it's considered one of their best songs, but
Nope.
I guess it might be a music critic thing, and it's just like, oh, I don't know obviously what this is about, so I can get deep into this song.
It's about
Or
slapping
something
your
like
parents.
that.
It's about slapping your parents.
It's like, I don't know. It might be about the gut feeling that, you know, the way your parents have brought you up is wrong or something like that. And I certainly would get that, but it's just like, there's no connective tissue in
Yeah.
this song to put together. So you kind of have to
Make something up as you
it's
go.
like, it's like looking at a broken vase after it's been cleaned up and there's like two pieces that are randomly in the carpet somewhere and trying to figure out how it broke. So that's just kind of
Yeah.
how it is for me.
Yeah, and it's certainly like Devo at their, you know, Devo don't really have jams in the same way, but like, you know, and certainly most Devo songs do stick to like the 3-minute sort of radio format. To sort of have them sprawl over as much as nearly 5 minutes is a little bit weird actually. This is like by far the longest track on the album.
Yeah, and when they jam, your mind doesn't process it as
No.
jam because they're still doing that same
Syncopated,
basic rhythm.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's still going, but it's just like, and then it took like 3 or 4 lessons to like, oh, this is a solo to this beat, and this is actually really good, but my mind couldn't tell it because it was just thinking it was all rhythmic electronic, and my mind kind of got like, you know, used to it and like didn't stop processing things.
Yeah. Next track is Come Back Joni. Come Back Joni is it's fine. It's okay. It's
kind of using 50s to comment on
Yeah.
now. Like I look at some of the things and it's like it's supposed to be about the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, you don't really get that. It, you know, first time I heard it, it's just like somebody's trying to bring back the 50s and it's not working.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of listening to it. And later I came back to it and it's like, oh, you're about to no?
Mm.
You're going to...
No.
And it's just like, yeah.
No. So this is probably most famous for appearing on the soundtrack of the film Rock and Roll High School.
The Ramones one.
Well, it's sort
I
of
saw
like
once. It is a very high school comedy of the 80s.
Yeah, it's actually
Like,
ironically because it was released in 1979.
Yeah, it is kind of what it would become because
Yeah.
you know at the late 70s they also had Porky's, they also had
Yeah.
Animal House, and eventually what it would evolve into, and it's just like R-rated movie, and it's, you know, kind of a movie about people who are obviously older than high school being in high school
Yeah.
and like making I can't remember if it was R-rated, but the only thing I remember is they had people monitoring them for drug testing, and they used apple juice to fake out their monitors, and they were like acting like they were peeing in when they were just pouring apple juice, and it's like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't my pee, and then they switch their urine and start drinking out of it, and the monitors like get completely grossed out. Now that's my pee. So they get the monitors away from them, so you know they pass like drug tests, even though a drug test would sense that was apple juice. But never mind. It is a an anarchic teenage high school movie
Yeah,
So-
it's interesting for early script work by Joe Dante. Soundtrack produced by Phil Spector. Yeah.
Ah, yes. Phantoms of the Past,
Yeah.
like Phil Spector.
Yes. Soundtrack otherwise features Nick Lowe, Alice Cooper, Chuck Berry, and I don't know if it's just like they were basically like a group package, but Brian Eno appears on the soundtrack of
Well,
Rock and Roll High School by like in his ambient phase at this point, which is very
the
peculiar.
the more we hear about this era by doing these videos, the more it's like everybody knew each other.
Yeah,
it has that feelings like these experimental people who go to Europe and do a bunch of stuff, and then pal around the States as well. Like they all know each other, they all work with each other. And they all eventually show up and cameo in each other's stories.
Oh, completely. It's like, and David Bowie seems to be in most of these places. Really, really strangely, Roger Corman's comic book group did a follow-up comic book issue of the film in the 90s. This is obviously, the great Roger Corman, who has basically made billions and billions of films, often at low budgets, obviously often launched the careers. He couldn't get the likenesses of the Ramones, so instead went for Seattle sludge metal band the Melvins, who at one point Kurt Cobain was the roadie for. That is a very strange moment.
Yeah.
That's not really the band you expect. Combat Joni is fine. Yep.
It's okay.
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
fine.
song. It's there.
Yeah, it's sort of next. The penultimate track on the album is "Sloppy." I saw my baby getting, which, again, it's fine. It's again, it is almost like this is almost like Devo wearing their "We're parodying the '50s, can you tell" hat.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, it's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. It's just like it lacks a clear target. Like it's parodying the vibe of it. I don't know. It's just like back in the days when they had door-to-door car salesmen, and you just got a new car whenever. I guess it's like, I don't know, consumerism or something.
Yeah, consumerism or something. And then we get Shrivel Up, which is another really good track. Actually, I feel like
it is actually a really good track. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of wrapping up the album, and
it is. But this is like again, I don't know whether like. I don't know whether Black Francis is a particular fan of Devo. On this track, like Mark Mothersbaug's vocals are really Pixies-ish. And like this is like, a full decade before the Pixies would do, Surfer Rosa. It's just like this the cadence, even sort of the instrumentation to an extent. This sounds like it was like a lost Pixies track about a decade before the Pixies were a thing.
Mm-hmm.
The lyrics are also great on this.
Yeah. It's another one of those. It took me a couple times, but I got this one. It's like you can't go back. It's like the consumerism is like causing them to break down and shrivel up.
Yeah. But the way this is played, the way it's played is just great. It's just like, dude, it's just sort of almost surf rockish sort of thing. It's sort of like, this is where like there is like a dark and an often slightly seedy underbelly to like Devo. There's like, peel back, the veneer of the squeaky clean American family, and underneath is this what the fuckness.
Yeah. It's, the most David Lynch this album
Oh,
gets, which
God, yeah.
It isn't much, because
No.
it is like that shot at the beginning of Blue Velvet where they have the, perfect house, and underneath it there's all these insects and stuff, and that's like, as this song devolves into word salad, the instrumentation starts getting a little more
Weird.
warbly and dissonant, and by the end there's just this tiny voice that just is shrivel up, and then you die or you lose your individuality or whatever it is.
Yeah, you devolve.
Yes.
So I feel we need to sort of like talk a little bit briefly about the sort of impact of this album. So obviously, this did tremendously. I mean, for an album that is essentially, very, I mean, I hesitate to say esoteric, because esoteric isn't fair.
Yeah.
It's, it is an absolute landmark in, the thing is with this album, I don't think you can really see an influence on like a particular group. It's very much, by this point, Devo have always cut a very, very, individual path. You can see where, like, you can see individual moments where bands have like homage Devo, but it's not like there are no bands we can point to and go, without Devo this band would not exist. It's more a sense of, I don't think new wave as a genre would exist in the way it did. Part of this is because Devo, We Are Devo peaked at number 78 on the Billboard charts in the United States. In the UK, this was at number 12. Like, this is like, I can absolutely guarantee, like, there were British bands who listened to this and went, cool, let's go buy a keyboard.
Yeah, like Men Without Hats definitely has a similar feel. Like that, like, especially if their second single, or like or Pop Goes the World, which was their most blatant statement on political statement. But yeah definitely.
Oh, completely, yeah.
So, I mean, there, and of course we wouldn't have Devo 2.0 without Devo. A short little aside, Devo 2.0 was a late 90s band that was created by the Walt Disney Company, that is early teenagers singing Devo, that entirely missed the point of the band.
Oh God, I need to Google this.
Yeah, it's the prototype version of Kids Bop.
Oh God, that is
before they.
That's weird, man. I'm just looking at this.
Yeah,
going,
it is weird. It is, like, we didn't get it at the time because everything in the 90s was post-consumerism and irony, so it's just like we were taking ourselves away from sincerity and feeling anything about anything, so we didn't really get, man, that's actually really fucked up.
What? I'm not convinced, like, Devo participated in this. Oh God, I'm very confused.
They probably did. As a private joke, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, this genuinely does feel like something Devo would do as a very weird joke. Like, yeah, this is very strange. Very strange.
But,
I mean,
they would eventually come up with their next album, and they would. It's at the same time when. The MTV revolution would happen.
Yeah, I mean,
they would become like more than household names. Like, you would never get Whip It ever out of your head again. It would always just be back there waiting.
Whip It good. Yeah. I mean, I would say you can certainly see like a lot of electronic bands who take influence from Devo. I feel like this is going to sound like a really strange comparison. I do feel like the successors to like a lot of what Devo were doing, although far less pointed and far less political, is something probably like They Might Be Giants, who also have a very strange, you know, kid-friendly sort of point to thing. Although certainly less barbed and certainly less, you know, but you know, again, it is very much like a novel at surface, a novelty band underneath, you know, really quite talented musicians. I don't know if you feel that's a little bit of a stretch, but
they are a great group in their own right. Like they have carved out their own niche. They have, you know, played it to a T, and they have taken it to, you know, way farther than I think they even considered it. Because I figured they would just be playing in, you know, some smallish New York bars and in other smallish places in major American cities for most of their life. But most people know who they are, and I mean, they might not know what they stand for, but they recognize them because it is just iconic. Unfortunately, it's iconic in the way that misses the point. It's like they are something that could be put with 50s and 60s quiche, and somebody's mind would not put together that these are actually a reaction to this, and this is,
completely,
a commentary, and it would just be another piece of the quiche.
Yeah, I certainly feel like the band that sort of, I guess, sort of joined Devo at the top of the, you know, basically American new wave, because obviously you get bands like the Talking Heads, but I don't think they ever quite, you know, the Talking Heads are off doing, ironically, with Brian Eno, their other sort of thing. You know, they basically are happily doing, you know, basically whatever it is they do. You know, I don't think the Talking Heads ever quite become a new wave band in the same way that they do. Is the B-52s, and I do feel like alongside Devo, there is this shared wellspring, I think, of, you know, 50s and 60s pop culture, you know, basically the disposability of culture, but where the B-52s are very, you know, I feel the B-52s are far more
they are more
sincere about
they are
it.
sincere about their send up to it. Like like I don't think you listen to Rock Lobster and go, oh, that's commentating on this or something like that. It is taking like the bizarre, like garish parts of the 60s and then turning it into fun.
Completely.
That's what I got out of them. I mean, it's like my parents had the big B-52 album that had you know, all their hits on it. And I listened to it, and it's just like I got no messages off of that.
No.
Like, does Cosmic Thing comment on anything? Not real. I don't think it does. I might have to go back and listen to it again now that my brain is, you know.
I mean, I think Cosmic Thing it has an agenda. I think that agenda is healing, obviously, from the, you know, the obviously the death of Ricky Wilson. I feel that is part and parcel of the record, that the record is essentially a cathartic, you know, attempt to go, one of your founding members has died of AIDS, this is what we do next. You know, I didn't know that part of it. We double up and we go again with the celebration of kitchnets. You know, whereas Devo's relationship with it is far more barbed and far more weaponized. And you know, if the B-52s are, you know, the sort of I guess the culture that what people think the 50s was like, and Devo is what the 50s were actually like. I think it's fair to say.
yeah, it's a really good album. I don't think I would listen to this on repeat just because it's too much of the same thing. Like,
yeah,
I now get the feeling why I'm not a person who listened to a lot of Devo.
Yeah.
I like them, I appreciate them.
Yeah.
But I don't listen to a lot of Devo because it's the same rhythm over and over again, and my brain eventually tunes it out. My ADHD can't
No, which is fair, you know.
It can't do a factory job. It can't do like one tedious thing over and over. And if not, it just it gets the feeling like it bruises or it melts or something like that. And that's what doing the same thing over and over does to my head.
Yeah.
So,
and I feel like
it's not their fault, it's me.
Completely. And I feel like obviously Devo, to an extent, are frankly, and I'm going to use this advisedly, are far more a singles band than an album band. They are basically, they have done probably a 2 or 3 records worth of of superb material over basically their career, and they're basically happy with that. They have, they are now, they are nearly up to 50 years. They are doing their supposed farewell tour as we speak. They are an institution in basically new wave and electronic music. I would say.
Yeah. I think we pretty much wrapped this one up.
Yeah.
Again, we found more to say than we thought we were because it's a 30-minute album and you kind of get the idea right away, and it just keeps selling that idea. And I think they would be more of a singles band. Like, you can take 1 or 2 singles that exemplify what that album is about from each of their works, and then just put that together, and then you would have your ultimate Devo album, or just
completely,
completely.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So that was Devo. They are in fact men. They are all human.
And we are Thom and Joe. We have a Patreon.
Yep.
Patreon.com/The Thom and Joe Show. Tom spelled with an H.
Yep.
And you can get our episodes early, and you can get our big Evangelion December
thing
videos well before
Yep.
They come out. We are releasing the episodes as we finish them.
Yep.
So you'll get that before we have the 12 days of Evangelion instead of the 12 days of Christmas. Patreon.com, The Thom and Joe Show. Give us $1.50, not much. And
might be more depending on how badly UK inflation goes in the next 6 months, but we'll see that.
Oh God, sorry. It's going to become like the yen.
It might become like the yen. We don't know yet. We'll see.
I love getting these deals from Japanese companies, and with decent shipping.
Yeah,
it is wonderful. But but with UK you have to deal with the VAT tax, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, before we go, I feel like I have to do one little. I've been doing little funny things at the end of shows as a thank you for listening to it, and since everybody says we talk like PBS Public Radio, I feel I have to talk about it in this way. There's a factual
factual inaccuracy.
I screwed it up, but factual inaccuracy on, the praying song that you would diddle with your left hand, whereas normal people, if they would diddle with the hand that they are dominant with, and thus the hand they would do work with. So if they were a left hand, they would be more like Ethan Hawke in the movie Gattaca, where the Xander Berkeley doctor character discovers him early on because righties hold it with the right hand. It's just a little thing they do, and a little thing you notice. Thank you, and good night.
We'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. and God bless.
Brilliant.
Oh, shrivel up. Shrivel